In 1935, reclined on the daybed of his dimly lit office, an unassuming clairvoyant, speaking from a trance, warned of catastrophic events brewing in Europe, indicated by the Austrians, Germans, and later the Japanese joining in their influence. These will gradually make for a growing of animosities. Unless there is interference from the supernatural forces that are active in the affairs of nations and peoples, the whole world will be set on fire by the militaristic groups. It's one thing for a psychic to correctly predict the nations that would make up the Axis several years before the Second World War broke out. But even stranger was his claim that the war would only be won if supernatural forces intervened. A little-known fact about World War II is that British intelligence formed the Witchcraft Research Center to combat the Nazis' own occult units, which ultimately led to the capture of Hitler's deputy Führer, Rudolf Hess. The clairvoyant who foresaw this event was Edgar Cayce, also known as the Sleeping Prophet. Many consider his prophecies to be the strongest evidence of paranormal and psychic abilities ever recorded due to their depth of documentation and incomparably high accuracy. Some of his prophecies, which later proved to be true, include the use of blood in diagnosing diseases, the La Nina and El Nino climate patterns, as well as the most devastating stock market crash in American history, which occurred in 1929, with date and details exactly as Cayce predicted on two separate occasions. The Sleeping Prophet also made claims about history's most enduring mystery, the lost city of Atlantis, which surprisingly hold water. This is because in these claims, he made a prediction which turned out to be fact. He stated that a hidden tunnel system, forgotten for over 2,000 years, would eventually be discovered beneath the front left paw of the Great Sphinx of Giza. Indeed, in 1987, a Japanese expedition performed electromagnetic sound surveys of the Sphinx, and they detected tunnels underneath that exact location, just as Cayce described, which
that leads
remain
to the
completely
Akashic records
unexcavated to this
of
day.
Earth.
I'm Mr. Mythos, and I'd like to introduce you to Edgar Cayce, the Sleeping Prophet of
Go
Atlantis.
subscribe to this dude's channel and do the thing, man. And
Edgar
listen.
Cayce was born in 1877 into a humble Christian home in Kentucky. As a boy, he reported speaking to his deceased grandfather, as well as playing with little people in the forest. And later, while studying the Bible in a woodland hut, a winged woman appeared to him and asked him what he wanted more than anything in the world. He responded that he wanted to help others, and in particular, sick children. This same entity would later reappear as Cayce was failing in school. His father struck him off of his chair as Cayce struggled to spell. In a daze, he heard the winged woman's voice tell him that they could help if only he just slept a bit. Cayce begged his father for rest, put his head on his spelling book, and when he woke up, the boy knew every answer and could recite every word.
And I just want to say that psychologists and scientists who study the way that the human brain is conditioned and can learn and develop as a child now understands that children need to sleep after learning a bit of something in order to be able to retain it. That's a fact.
But more than this inexplicable gift of memorization, which he used to become top of his class, he soon discovered that he could help people suffering from ailments. And not long after, he began to predict the future. As an adult, this seer acquired the nickname the Sleeping Prophet because of his peculiar technique. In order to channel his higher self into a trance-like state, he would loosen his tie, kick off his shoes, then lay down on his daybed and promptly fall asleep. His wife recorded his words during these trances. As fame spread of Cayce's power, Tens of thousands of people sought his help, including the iconic inventor Thomas Edison, the magician Harry Houdini, and even the then President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson.
That's right.
Perhaps the most clear evidence that Cayce was not a charlatan was the fact that he refused to charge for his readings. He helped those in need for free, making his living as a local photographer. In all, 14,306 psychic readings were fully documented, 132 of which regarded the treatment of hair loss, which many of Edgar Cayce's patients suffered. Statistics show that 2 out of 3 men will experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. But if these men were alive today, perhaps it wouldn't have been a problem. Thanks to Keeps, a subscription service which makes it incredibly easy to treat male pattern baldness from home.
See how I did that? That was slick.
Medication discreetly delivered to your door. Keeps even gives you access to a licensed doctor to recommend the right treatment and answer any questions you may have along the way. My tales of the spiritual world. At least in the physical world, I can tell you, Mrs. Mythos definitely appreciates me using
Hair actually is your antenna. That's why Native American men never cut their hair, just like women never cut their hair. You'll notice in a lot of religious belief systems, the women don't cut their hair. And even in some, the men do not cut their hair, because we all understand on some level in our DNA memory that the hair is a true antenna.
Keeps. If you're ready to prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/mythos or click the link in the description to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/mythos. Now back to the Sleeping Prophet.
Yes, let's get back to it.
Edgar Cayce's most famous prophecy came to him while he slept in his office, surrounded by his loved ones. To the shock of all, he began madly whispering predictions about a mystery as old as time itself. For literally thousands of years, explorers have sought the lost city of Atlantis, speculating on its culture, technology, and what truly became of the Atlantean people. The traditional narrative is that a flood swept the nation to sea, destroying everything in its wake and drowning the city's entire populace. In reality, however, rarely does a natural disaster kill everyone in the location it strikes.
Unless it's a
Even the most severe
cyclical
disasters
worldwide
usually have
cataclysmic event.
survivors. For instance, some even survived Mount Vesuvius's eruption at Pompeii. Logic then dictates that there must have been at least one survivor of Atlantis. Cayce, from his daybed, claimed that there were many. Many ancient writers were not shy to express their belief that Atlantis was once a real place, such as Crantor, a student in the Greek philosopher Plato's academy, with Plato's writings being the earliest known record of Atlantis. Atlantis also featured in the writings of the biographer Plutarch, who wrote that the Athenian lawmaker and poet Solon had learned the story of Atlantis from the Egyptians, who apparently knew Atlantis very well. Edgar Cayce also believed a strong connection existed between the Atlanteans and the Egyptians. In his most famous reading, Cayce claimed that Atlantis was destroyed in a final catastrophic event around 10,000 BC, and that through superior technology, the Atlanteans learned of their city's imminent destruction and hid their secrets in a grand library located underneath the Sphinx. Cayce provided many details of Atlantis in its prime, too, describing it not as a Bronze Age civilization, but instead a technologically and scientifically advanced society, complete with submarines, electromagnetic aircraft, elevators, air balloons, a broadcasting system, and electricity powered by giant crystals. Cayce termed Atlantean civilization the Golden Age. Perhaps most strangely, he claimed that those who lived in Atlantis, while human, were able to live extremely long lives, some for as long as 10,000 years, through a sophisticated Atlantean rejuvenation process used to restore one's youth over and over. This required the use of a specific crystal, the Tuaui stone, which Cayce described as a six-sided cylindrical quartz, which used a type of ultraviolet light to power it. Interestingly, this sounds similar to the workings of a modern-day laser beam. So, what actually became of Atlantis? To begin, we should take a look at the more pragmatic possibilities. An interesting fact of history is that the ancient Greeks documented a vast number of so-called ghost islands. These islands varied in characteristics. Some were hot, some were cold, some rich with fauna, while others were utterly deserted. Only one theme remains common among them.
They all
All
had
of these
water,
places seem to have disappeared. At this point, we must seriously ask ourselves,
and they all had
why
water.
would the ancient Greeks falsely record so many islands? The only sensible conclusion is that these islands indeed existed, but were ultimately destroyed by natural disasters. Historians and academics generally attribute Atlantis' disappearance, if it truly existed, to volcanic eruption, earthquakes, and tsunamis. And in Plato's accounts, he describes Atlantis as being very mountainous, which fits the idea of it being a volcanic island. The Sleeping Prophet, however, claimed otherwise. As opposed to being destroyed naturally, Edgar Cayce stated that in its final day, control over Atlantis. The children of the Law of One, who wanted to return to spiritual attunement with nature,
That's
and
people like
the
me.
sons of Belial, who aimed to exploit natural resources for material gain.
That's people like
This
Edison
conflict ultimately ended in the obliteration of their entire civilization in a series of mega explosions, possibly a nuclear war.
and J.P.
Prior
Morgan
to the final
and
sinking, however,
Rothschilds.
Cayce said that a mass exodus of Atlanteans occurred, and in particular, their historians fled to Egypt, with whom they were close. The Atlanteans who survived vowed one day to return, to restore the glory of Atlantis when the world was once again ready. And to ensure they indeed could, they hid their secrets and most precious treasures and technology, including the Tuaui stone, inside the Hall of Records, a hidden chamber deep beneath the sands of Egypt. The Sleeping Prophet, from his shadowy office, predicted that underneath the Great Sphinx of Giza, there existed a vast network of underground tunnels.
I just want to remind everyone that the Sphinx is not meant to have a man's face, but a female face of Asherah, the mother.
Connected to a huge library, the Hall of Records. Cayce pinpointed the library's exact location, claiming that it was hidden underneath the paws of the Sphinx. And stored inside of it was Atlantean knowledge of astronomy, magic, medicine, alchemy, mathematics, and religion. This mysterious subterranean vault may actually be connected to Hermes Trismegistus, an ancient Egyptian,
also known as Thoth. And I'll just remind you again that through ground radar penetration, we have discovered this Hall of Records. And now, flash forward to present day, they're even closing off the pyramids. U.S. government, NASA, are closing off the pyramids, not letting people in, saying that they're unstable and unsafe to be in.
Prophet who possibly lived 4,000 to 6,000 years ago and was a supposed holder of the Philosopher's Stone. Trismegistus was the author of the Emerald Tablet, a legendary artifact which many believe to hold the secrets of alchemy and life itself. I previously made a video on the Emerald Tablet, which I'll link to at the end.
Thoth is
It's widely
Asherah's
believed
son.
that Alexander the Great hid the original Emerald Tablet